would you be okay with a Muslim prime minister of UK?
Yeah.
You'd be okay. That wouldn't do anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's your concern isn't that at all?
No, not at all. No, listen, I don't want to radicalise Muslim running the country. The same way that you get Christian extremists in America who've committed appalling atrocities. I don't assume that every Christian, I'm a Christian, I don't assume every Christian in America is a potential extremist. It's got to be a more...
You're comparing the two? We're finally doing this.
I can't believe it. Yeah. I'm here.
Yeah, it's normally through the Zoom and you're out there doing your thing, but it's great to sit down together.
Thank you for having me. But also the scale of your empire here is quite something.
Well, thank you. Yeah, most people when they come, they're thinking, and then they see what's going on. It's exciting.
Very impressive.
I want to talk to you about, your relationship with the president. I want to talk to you about some of the stuff with Israel that you've hosted. So I think you hosted the first big one with Bassem Youssef came on, that one fiery 30-something million views. And then there was a back and forth. But also with what's going on with London. So right now in U.S., Mumdani just became the mayor of New York City, financial capital of the world. Prior to that, the financial capital of the world was London, right? So you guys had it for 100 years. We had it for 100 years. And, when Americans sometimes look at Europe and they look at EU, they're like, wow, look, London's lost. They've lost their identity. Look what's going on to them. And we had Dominic Tarczynski, who was here from Poland. He said, we'll never do what London is doing. We'll never do what EU is doing. What can New Yorkers, if you can give them advice to what to look for? You guys have Sadiq Khan. I think he's the first three-term mayor in London ever, right? Muslim guy himself. What happened to London after he came in that New Yorkers can expect?
It's interesting because I think there's been a slight mischaracterization of the comparison between Mumdani and Sadiq Khan. They're both Muslims, but Sadiq Khan is very much a establishment Labour figure in the UK. He's not a progressive woke left guy on many issues. Mumdani is full-on self-acclaimed socialist. That's not Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan, the parallel I said with Mumdani, he keeps winning elections because the opponents they put up against him have been universally useless.
This is Sadiq.
Yeah, so he's had a very easy run. And to be fair to him, he's won re-election twice. Mumdani was up against Cuomo, who I always felt was damaged goods. I felt if you're going to put a moderate up against him who actually was new and fresh and interesting, he probably could have done better, or she could have done better. So Mumdani had a bit of a clean run against a damaged guy, I felt. But there's no doubt this is a seismic moment for New York. I mean, it's the biggest city in America. It's one of the great capital cities of the world. It's, in many ways, the heart of capitalism itself. And here you've got a guy out there not just espousing a socialist philosophy, but it's seemingly utterly determined to try and deliver it. Now, I would say, look, Mr. Mumdani, this is all very well offering everybody everything for free, but there's a reason socialism hasn't worked anywhere in the world for any sustained period of time. At some point, somebody has to pay for this. So who's going to pay for all this? And the answer will be what's happened with the Labour government in the UK. The taxes aren't set by Sadiq. He has a tiny bit of power over local taxation. But the Labour government came in with a thumping majority just over a year ago. Massive, one of the biggest majorities of modern times, a real repudiation of years of very poor rule by the Conservative Party under a series of prime ministers. And they promised all sorts of things. Prosperity is coming, hope is coming, all these things. And it's been a complete disaster. And they're now about to unleash a budget in about 3 weeks' time, which they're already setting the stall by is going to be a total U-turn on all their pledges in the election campaign. They said they wouldn't raise income tax. They're going to. They said they wouldn't do this, wouldn't do that. They're going to do it all because they've realized they can't pay for all the promises they made. And I think this is what's going to happen in New York.
How ugly things going to be in New York?
Well, it's going to get very interesting politically, I think, because Mumdani is clearly the most charismatic figure the Democrats have had, really, for a long time, since Obama, you could argue.
Maybe even more charismatic than Obama, if you think about it.
He's more engaging, actually. I think he's more engaging. And look, he's an Arsenal fan like me, a big Arsenal fan. So we have that in common. And it's not that I object to his aspirations. It's just that often with socialists, there's a complete disconnect between the aspiration and the ability to deliver. Now, if we come back in 2 years' time, let's be clear. If Mumdani, within 2 years, manages to deliver on his socialist agenda in a way that is deemed to be successful and popular, massive transformative moment for the Democrats leading into the next general election. I don't think he can. I think the opposite will happen. I think he'll either, like a lot of these guys, once they get power, pivot more to the center ground Or he will try and force through these socialist policies. It won't work, and he will become the stick to beat the Democrats with leading into the next general election. So there's massively high stakes here because the Democrats have nobody else who has any real charisma. Nobody. And in fact, the most charismatic people on the left in America right now, you could argue, are Mumdani, AOC, and Bernie Sanders. So you've got a bunch of socialists dominating the news cycle for them.
Yeah, and what do you do with that, right, when you're seeing that part taking place? Because, on the other side, Nancy Pelosi stepping down, Newsom, you hear that voice coming up, and you're an interesting place because you do business in New York, you have a property, I believe, in L.A., you're in London, you're going back and forth, so you kind of are able to, compare all those different climates. But going back to UK, London, so we see the videos. We see Tommy Robinson. I have Tommy Robinson on. I know you guys have had your set of back and forth, and I've followed it over the years of what's happened. But what do you think about what Tommy says? Not his background, not any of the criminal stuff, not any of that stuff that maybe you guys have issues with. I'm not trying to do the personal stuff. What do you think about what Tommy is showing when he's going in the streets, having 100,000 people showing up? A lot of people in London finally are coming out saying the Overton window of immigration, not even people in London, the story came out last week, they're even more aggressively anti-immigration than America. They're like, we don't want any more of this. For you, somebody who is from there, what have you noticed the changes in London since Muslims started entering decades ago?
Well, I think it's the problem has been massively exaggerated. However, there is a rising problem. That's how I would categorize it myself. Tommy Robinson resonates with people because of two things, I think. One, he was absolutely right about the grooming gang scandal in the north of England. It was a horrendous scandal involving almost exclusively British Pakistani men abusing young white English girls. That was the scandal, and it was going on for years. It was horrific. These girls were being appallingly abused by a particular section of the community. But nobody dared say what that community was because they were trapped in woke ideology that you can't name a criminal if it doesn't suit the woke agenda. And so Tommy Robinson was one of those people that early on began calling this out, and he was right to do so, and he deserves credit for doing it. Mainstream media weren't completely oblivious. One guy on the Times actually exposed it originally and kept banging that drum. But many people in the establishment in the UK conspired to cover it up. They didn't want this. They thought it would be too much of a powder keg to say what actually happened, which is this was British Pakistani men abusing white English girls. That was it. And they should have been clear with what was going on. So Tommy Robinson deserves credit for that. Let's not get into his background. I have my issues about it. I have my issues about some of the sanitization of who he is when he comes on American shows because he tends to, I think, be very disingenuous. But park all that. Why is he also gathering momentum now with his marches, which used to be, really a bunch of thugs running around, attacking police and so on. But it's morphed into a much bigger number of people. Many of them are completely peaceful. Many of them share his concerns about immigration failures, in terms of policy failures in the country for decades now. And again, on that specific, he's right. And the reason he's right is you can go back to really, it's interesting that I think the way this has played out. Tony Blair in the early 2000s opened the floodgates on immigration, but to Eastern Europe. And so we suddenly had a massive influx of people from Eastern Europe into the UK. And this was deemed to be a good thing, and then it became a thing that was slightly out of control. And then generally, immigration seemed to spiral out of control, both legal and illegal.
Do you think it is a good idea to keep allowing people to come in, to combine the Islam way of thinking, what their ideas are, and coexist with the Western ideology?
Well, I think there are issues which are serious to be considered. For example, it's been reported there are as many as potentially 85 unofficial Sharia courts in the UK now, which are not operating under UK law. They're operating in their own law for their own communities. That clearly is not a good thing in a country like the UK. I would say, look, we have a very high Muslim population now, comparative percentage-wise to the United States. In fact, I think they're not far off in terms of total numbers to the whole of America. So we have a lot of Muslims who live in the UK. We've always been a very multicultural, very tolerant place. That's why people want to come and live there, a bit like America. I would say the vast majority, I've said this before and I say it again, the vast majority of Muslims living in the UK have assimilated perfectly well and lived perfectly peaceful and lives which contribute to society. The problem is, I think, coming with the sheer volume of people coming in and the sheer volume coming in illegally as well, where, as you've had in the United States, people have actually no idea who these people really are, how radicalized they may be, what their plans may be when they get to the United Kingdom. And then you see the quite disturbing spectacle of protests, say, in London during the Israel-Hamas war, where people are brazenly supporting Hamas in these protests. And, Hamas is a prescribed terror group in the United Kingdom. That should be not happening. So there is a rising concern, which Robinson has tapped into, and some would say, his critics would say, he's fueled it for his own devices, but he's tapped into a genuine concern. And the worrying thing for the government should be that as their popularity plunges, the popularity of people like Robinson and like the Reform Party under Nigel Farage, although those two don't get on, you're seeing a rising sentiment in the UK that we're losing our identity as a country. And what should we do about that? This is a challenge that's come, in my opinion, across the whole of Europe. The sweeping migration, much of it coming from countries that have been at war, whether it's Syria, Iraq, or wherever it may be. But you've had millions and millions and millions of people deposed from their homes or fleeing war-torn situations and sweeping across the continent of Europe and wanting a better life for their families, which I completely understand. But it has got unsustainable. And it's not just a problem for the UK, it's a problem for Germany, for France, for many of the European countries. They're all facing the same challenges. Nobody at the moment, it seems to me, has a clear idea of what we do about this, other than I look at somewhere like the United States. I look at the way Donald Trump just slammed the brakes on the southern border almost instantaneously and reduced the number of people coming in from 2.5 million a year to literally a couple of thousand a month, right? And you look at that and you think, well, okay, you can control borders. You just have to have the determination to do it. I also think Trump has universal support in America when he says that anyone who's here illegally in the United States who then commits a crime outside of their immigration status should be deported. Where the flashpoint comes, and where it's an interesting thing as to whether other countries like the UK follow the Trump philosophy on this, is where you start deporting people who have been here for a number of years illegally, but who have been maybe working, paying taxes, contributing to society, bringing up kids and so on. What do you do with those people?
What would Churchill have done? What do you think he would have done?
I think what would he have done?
Seriously, what do you think he would have done? Just think his profile.
I certainly think right now he would have put the clamps down on more people coming
would
in.
He have
except
sent,
in
would
exceptional circumstances.
Would he have sent anybody back from the 7% that came here? How would he have treated some of the criminals? How would he have treated some of the some of the stuff that's going on?
So I would say he certainly wouldn't have just picked out the Muslim community. We have a lot of different communities. Like I said, the grooming gang scandal in America was very high profile and attracted a lot of heat, obviously. But we have a lot of different religions, nationalities living in the UK. I don't think he would have singled out Muslims. I think what he would have taken a more pragmatic view and gone, we have too many people in this country now. There's too much pressure on our public services. Some people are going to have to leave. Who are those people? Well, anyone who commits a crime, who's come in here to this country legally but commits a crime, should be deported. I think most people feel that. And then you've got to stop the people coming in illegally. What is the most effective way of doing that? No one's had a good plan so far. The Conservative Party boasts about their Rwanda plan, but it was so ridiculous. It was like a tiny handful of people would have ever got on those planes to Rwanda. It was never going to work in the way they kept trying to promise it would. So what is the most effective way to do it? I actually think that if Trump was in charge, for example, he'd probably say to Emmanuel Macron, if you don't stop these boats leaving your shores, because it has to be done at the French end, then we're going to tariff you 1,000% on your wine and cheese coming into the UK. He would have taken a brutal move like
Why
that.
are they not doing that right now?
I don't know. I don't know why they're not sort of tougher on the French. You've got to do a deal with the French on this. You've got to say, look, sorry, you're letting all these people get on these boats. Once they're at sea, there's hardly any way to stop them. And then once they wash up on our shore, they are legally allowed to remain as potential asylum seekers.
Would you be okay with a Muslim prime minister of UK?
Yeah.
You'd be okay. That wouldn't do anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's your concern isn't that at all?
No, not at all. No, listen, I don't want to radicalize Muslim running the country. I don't want to radicalize anything running the country. There's a lot of radicalized elements of all religions, of all nationalities. I don't like anyone who's radicalized. It's dangerous for any country to have people at the helm who are radicalized. Do I think we have a particular problem in the UK with radicalized Muslims? I'm not convinced by that. I think there are radicalized Muslims, and clearly the Muslim population is rising exponentially fast compared to other populations. So we are going to have to look at this and say, well, what do we do about this going forward in a way that you don't look like you're just picking on people because of their Muslim faith?
I respect the tolerance that you have of what could happen to Brit long term, because I think sometimes when you're in it and it's gradual, like the whole thing about you put a frog in a boiling water and you boil it slowly, and then boom, he's dead. It's too late, right? I think sometimes when people are in it, they're like, yeah, well, it's okay with this, it's okay with that, it's okay with this. I think UK is flirting with being tolerant, and it'd be interesting to see who would rise up and want to do something about it.
Well, look, I go to a lot of Muslim countries. I've been in Saudi Arabia. I've been in
To me,
Qatar.
the biggest thing is the extremists. It's not a...
No, exactly. Here's my point, though. But also, they have zero tolerance of people wanting to operate under their own laws when they go to those countries. For example, so the whole debate about Sharia law and so on, I can understand why a lot of Brits get exercised about that, because if I went to Saudi Arabia or Qatar or somewhere and decided I would ignore the country's laws and operate under my own laws while I was there, you wouldn't get away with it for very long.
So why would you be okay with that? Why would you be okay with that?
Well, I wouldn't.
No, but what I'm saying is, so if you were okay with somebody who's a Muslim to become a prime minister, and then say they're the noble one, right? And they're coming in, they actually love Britain. But it opens it up, and an extremist like, I'm going to get in. Then they come in and they say, hey, Sharia law, what are you going to do about it? Then what? Because you're making it a step ahead.
Yeah, but I don't think you can't tar the entire Muslim population with the brush of potential extremism in the same way that you get Christian extremists in America who've committed appalling atrocities. I don't assume that every Christian, I'm a Christian, I don't assume every Christian in America is a potential extremist. I just think it's... There's got to be a more...
You're comparing the two?
No, I'm just saying extremism is extremism. Isn't it? Isn't it?
It is.
Well, it's the same, isn't it?
It is. No, I think extremism is extremism. To me, that's not the part of it. But when you look at the percentage of who is, like, for example, in America, I don't care what part of the world you're in. When Japanese came to the World Cup, do you remember the story about the Japanese when they went to the World Cup? What were they doing afterwards at the end of the game? They were cleaning up the arena. Everyone's like, what are they doing here? That's what we do in Japan. So would I want 1,000 Japanese neighbors? Yes. Would I want 10,000 Japanese neighbors? I don't care what religion they are. I don't care what God they believe in. They are their own people. They raise kids. They go and work. They don't hate America. They don't get up there and commit terrorist crimes. You don't hear stories like that from them. They just go and do their part, right?
But I would argue this back. Right? So I went to the Qatar World Cup, for example, for a week. Felt completely safe. There was no hooliganism whatsoever.
But that's not the same as the extremists. These are two different...
No, I agree. But again, I think there's extremists everywhere attached to all different groups. And I would say that I like the way the Middle East has been opening up in the last decade. I think it's exciting, it's dynamic. I just interviewed Cristiano Ronaldo in Riyadh at his home there. One thing he said, it just feels really safe. And it feels like it's opening up in a way that's good for families and everything else. And I think that's great. I think we should be encouraging countries like that to continue the evolution that they're on. Without sort of, I don't like the tinge of you're all potential extremists until you prove otherwise.
No, because
I think it's unfair to a whole. I mean, how many Muslims are there in the world? 1.4 billion. Are we really suggesting that 1.4 billion Muslims are all potential extremists? Because I don't get that sense of the Muslims I know in London. I walk down my high street in London. There are Muslims running all sorts of different businesses.
Okay.
And honestly, they're not extremists.
If we look at immigrants that come to America, what percentage of them are on SNAP the most? Have you seen this chart?
No.
Can you pull up this chart, Rob? So if you statistics are going to show it to you. So if you look at stats on what percentage of SNAP in America, what communities are taking advantage of it the most, Rob? I think we send it in Twitter in a group text where it breaks down who uses it the most and who doesn't use it the most. And stats will tell you, guess what? You'll be able to look at that and say, okay, these communities, if it's Armenian, if it's Assyrian, if it's Persian, if it's this, I want to know about it.
Yeah.
And then from there, you have to sit there and say, when people come here from XYZ country, they make America a great place. Let's get some more of them. When people come here from XYZ countries, they don't make the place a better place. Well, let's do something about it as well. Can you? Did you find it, Rob?
I'm looking right now.
Hey, Humberto, can you guys send the chart? I think you know which one I'm talking about. That breaks down exactly the SNAP benefits. You will see in America. So while the government shutdown took place, food stamps by ethnicity. 45.6% of immigrants from Afghanistan are on SNAP. 42.4% from Somalia. 35% from Iraq. Then it's Dominican, Caribbean, Native, Puerto Rican, Cuban. So if I look at this number here, keep going all the way down, Rob, keep going all the way down, all the way down, all the way down, all the way down. Okay, so then what do you see? Indians, 4.4%. Why are Indians not our SNAP? Indians are not Christians. I don't care what the religion is. Okay, I'm not sitting here saying, well, but if you go all the way to the top and you look at SNAP, why are we inviting more from Afghanistan, Somalia, Iraq?
I'd need to study this in more depth, but certainly the Afghanistan, Somalia, Iraq, these are people, I imagine, predominantly who have fled war-torn countries. So they, by definition, when they come to America, are going to be impoverished.
Yeah,
right?
but when America was founded, it's about getting the best to come over here, right? Like you run a business, you have one of the top shows. When it comes down to debate, you're running the number one show in the world. When it comes down to debate, I don't think anybody is doing a better job than you when it comes down to the debate shows. But you would sit there and you would say, all right, can we look at the last 100 hires that we made? Yes. What school did they come from? Okay, and we'll see a pattern. Who has been here that has the highest retention ratio? And it'll say, University of Florida, their tenure with our company is 3.8 years. Florida State is 7 months. I'm just making stuff up. FIU is 1.1. Such and such is, and guys, no more recruiting from FIU. I don't know the people at FIU. I don't know the people from Florida State. All I see is the tenure. When they come in, they're contributing to society in a positive way. I think from that standpoint, you have to consider who it's coming in. I don't care if you're Muslim, Christian, Jehovah, Seventh-day Jew.
Let me ask you a difficult question. Yeah. So you fled your family from
Iran. I lived there for 11 years.
From a war-torn place.
We did.
Right? So take Iraq, for example. When I was editor for the Daily Mirror in the UK, I opposed the Iraq war before, during, and after it. Cost me my job in the end.
Yeah.
After 10 years running the newspaper. But I think I was vindicated by what happened afterwards. That war was fought on a false pretext. Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. They never found them. So and also there was this kind of subliminal, we need to respond to 9/11. We can take out Saddam. I never saw that connection. It seemed to me completely wrong. Much more arguable to go after where bin Laden and his people were in Afghanistan. So I look at Iraqis, right, who were displaced by a war, which many people, including me, would say was an illegal war in their country that caused utter devastation. And they come to somewhere like the United States, which has been the home for people like that ever since its inception, and is lauded around the world for that, for being a place that you can come to, right, from places like that. But is there not a particular duty of care? Maybe you don't think there is, but is there not a duty of care to people who come from a war-torn place like Iraq, where the United States, along with the UK and other countries, waged that war, in my view, completely wrongly, in a way that caused their displacement, caused them to lose their homes, maybe lose their loved ones, and they come here for a better life, but when they get here, they have nothing. Now, that may explain some of those numbers. I don't know. But certainly in that case, you've got to think, well, okay, if they're the ones who are getting the SNAP benefits, okay, what is the correlation between the ones who were displaced because of the actions of the United States and the UK and the other allies that fought the Iraq war on their presence here in the United States, and is there a duty of care towards them? I don't think we should lose in the mix of all this a compassion towards genuine asylum seekers, particularly from countries ravaged by wars which we may have been complicit in starting, in my opinion, on a false pretext.
Yeah, I think that I would sit there again. I would sit there and I would say, if we're looking at anybody that's coming in, if we caused some of this, let's see what we can do about it. Now, of course, somebody in America could say, well, you caused all of it, right?
Right.
Okay, no problem. But if you're coming to America and you hate America, I have no tolerance for you.
I agree with that. I agree.
And you don't want to give anything back to the company, I have a hard time with you being here.
I agree.
To me, you know what it's like? When I came here, I served the Army. I've worked since the day I came to America, even when I was selling hats and shirts when I was 13, 14 years old. I love everything about this country, America, for me.
I agree with you about people who come here and then vocally hate America.
That's the problem, though, Piers.
No, but I agree.
The problem ends up happening is...
But that's a separate problem to the one I'm articulating.
But what I'm saying is the filtering. To me, it's the filtering.
Yes.
If I see... If we do want, and by the way, the argument some people in America are like, look, we don't want anybody else to come in here. This is plenty, right? There are people that I've had on the podcast that wouldn't even want me to be here right now. They're like, you know, you got lucky getting in here, which is their argument. They have the right to have that argument.
How wrong is that argument?
I respect it. So if somebody's born in America and they're kind of like, look, man, yeah, maybe we got lucky with you, Pat, but we got a lot of ones that came through and we didn't get lucky with that. Hate America. To me, we need some stats. So I think if you looked at the stats and the data, and it shows that any of the immigrants are coming from a certain country who assimilate, love the country, don't want any entitlement programs, they create businesses, they create jobs, they make it safer, let's get more. If not, listen, keep it where it's at. To me, that's where it stops.
If you go and bomb a country and you destroy people's lives, I do think a country like the United States, most prosperous country in the world, does have a duty of care to bring some of those people into its country, as it has done with the Iraqi community in the United States.
What if that's a royal screw-up on another administration that you never agreed with them? Because Trump doesn't agree with Bush. And remember, if there's any guy that has moral authority to say, I never supported that war, it's the guy that bought a full-page ad, I think it was in USA Today. Remember that one thing that he did back in the days? It's like, I am not for this war, right? So maybe he's saying, I didn't do that. Bush did that. That wasn't my doing. I'm changing it. We're going to do a different...
the good thing under Trump is that clearly and unusually for a Republican president of modern times, he is a man who prefers peace to war. I mean, he shows that with his actions in his first term and what he's done now. I mean, this idea, the debate about whether he gets a Nobel Peace Prize, Barack Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize for 2 fancy speeches 8 months into his first tenure. I mean, absolutely insane. The idea Trump wouldn't get one for simply getting the hostages released, never mind anything else.
You want to know the craziest thing about Barack Obama's Nobel Peace Prize? You ready? You're going to lose your mind when I tell you this. So you know how we always say 8 months into being president, 8 months into being president. Do you know to win a Nobel Peace Prize, they have to nominate you before January 31st?
It was 11 days.
11 days into it.
That's ridiculous. That means someone did it the day he was inaugurated. I know.
That's that right there. The deadline for Nobel's Peace Prize nomination is January 31st. The guy wins 20 at 11 days.
I didn't know that.
Did you not know? That's the wildest story when you think about that.
Makes it even more insane.
Yeah. So, Piers, for you, the one thing that I think you probably have a lot of moral authority on this is the following. October 7th happens. Hamas attacks Israel, and we watch the whole thing, right? And then you do Bassem, and then you host all of these debates, and you're like, wait a minute, what did they do to Palestine? What is it going? So you kind of go from the pendulum, because I personally watch you go like this 3-4 times, because it seems like you're coming from a place that we're like, wait a minute, they're doing that? I'm not with that. And where did you go there, day one, to where are you now? Probably the most reasonable opinion is where you are today, because you've kind of watched it going back and forth. What's your opinion on what happened there?
Well, first of all, October the 7th was one of the most heinous terror attacks of modern times, the worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust in World War II. These are undeniable facts. Hamas committed an act that day which immediately established them as a terrorist organization, who therefore renounced any rights to any governmental power at the end of all this. So that all happened on October the 7th with the scale of what they did. 1,200 people killed, nearly 7,000 wounded, 6 people kidnapped. I mean, absolutely despicable, horrific thing. So for many months after that, to the angst of many on the pro-Palestinian side and fury in some cases, I steadfastly defended Israel's right to defend itself. In fact, I said they didn't just have a right to defend themselves, but given that the Hamas official spokesman went on the airways about a week after the October the 7th atrocity to say, we're going to keep doing this again and again, the Israeli government had a duty, not just a right, but a duty to defend its people from further attacks from Hamas. So, okay, I laid my credentials down. People like Bassem Youssef came on and gave me a very hard time, but I always platform people like him. I platform people on both sides throughout the war.
You always. Yep.
And the bigger the followings they had, the more passionate, the better, because they were the ones getting most of the hearing on the airwaves. And I believe it's my job is to hear all the voices, challenge them all, and let the viewers work out where they think the reality lies. And I continued, and I would still defend Israel's right to defend itself. Right? I mean, Hamas are a terror organization. I've never disputed that at all, and I don't dispute it today. So when people on the really sort of more extremities of the pro-Israeli side, accuse me of being a pro-Hamas guy, well, it's so pathetic. Nothing I've ever said is anything other than they're a disgusting terror group and should have no power after all of this. And they should lay down their arms, and that's going to be the big debate as to whether they do. But then this year, and in particular, several things happened. One was the 3-month blockade, which, I've heard the arguments that there was no starvation, you never saw a starving Palestinian, blah, 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 blah. And one of the inherent problems, actually, with that, and with a lot of the IDF blanket denials of things, or we're going to set up an inquiry and investigation when things go wrong. Fog of war, stuff happens. But the Israeli government's persistent, to this day, refusal to allow independent media into Gaza to do their jobs has been a massive problem for their credibility.
Yep.
If you've nothing to hide or worry about in terms of what you're doing, let war correspondents do their job. And as a journalist, I think it's a fundamental principle which they have continued to abrogate in a pretty shameful way, actually. And it does inevitably raise in me, as a journalist, suspicions about what they're hiding, which means they don't want to let journalists in, particularly even since the ceasefire. Still, journalists aren't allowed in by the Israeli government. So the blockade, I felt, was likely to pass the threshold of a criminal act. When you have a country that has the control over a border like Israel does over Gaza, allowing hardly any supplies of food or aid to go in, then I think that is a criminal act. Now, a lot of the official bodies like the United Nations and others said the same thing, but Israel doesn't take any of them seriously. So again, I don't know for sure what was happening in that period because I didn't see any independent journalists reporting on it. I do know Palestinian journalists reported on it, and 220 odd have been killed during the conflict. So there's not just a fog of war about this. There's a deliberate suppression by the Israeli government of allowing journalists to do their job, international independent journalists. I think that's to their great discredit. So I thought the blockade was just crossed every line. Then they undid the blockade, but the bombardment was relentless. And I kept saying to people throughout the war from day one, I don't know what a proportionate response is here. There have been flare-ups in this conflict going back 7 decades. We have never seen anything on the scale of what Hamas did that day, and we've never seen anything on the scale of the response by the Israeli government. They've killed 65, nearly 70,000 people. None of the ones we know about. That's obviously you have to take the figures from the Gaza-run health authority, the Hamas-run health authority Gaza, because there is no other way of establishing it. Historically, those figures have normally proven to be quite accurate, but Israel keeps trying to foggy those numbers, deny them, obfuscate and so on, to which I say, well, let the journalists in. Let's find the truth. They don't want to do that. So again, that's my big bugbear with this, how you get to the actual truth.
You think it's a genocide or a war?
I don't think it's a genocide simply for one reason. The word genocide gets bandied about a lot. It means the willful, systematic destruction of a people. And I don't think that's what we've seen in Gaza, much as people on the pro-Palestinian side try and get me to say it. No actual declaration of genocide has been waged against any. I mean, even in Rwanda, they never established it as an international court, but it was a genocide. So I didn't know. I learned all this actually covering all this on my show. I had a bunch of genocide experts on. Many think it is a genocide, but many don't think it is. But they all pointed out that actually the bar for reaching genocide is exceptionally high. And, as people have pointed out, there are other flashpoints around the world right now where probably many more people are getting killed. No one cares. No one's putting any spotlight on it. So I think that the rhetoric that's come from people like Smodrich and Ben-Gvir on the Israeli government side, who keep, every time they gob off, and they're very extreme far-right guys, they clearly have had a plan almost from day one of this to turn the events of October the 7th into an opportunity to ethnically cleanse Gaza of Palestinians. And by that I mean just kick them out. And they've now been openly talking about this year. So once I saw that happening, I was like, okay, there are elements of this government who genuinely do want not just to dismantle Hamas and get the hostages released. They want to kick the Palestinians out of Gaza. They want to annex the West Bank. They said it. You can hear the tapes. And then I hear, well, they don't matter. Their opinions don't matter. They're senior members of the government. So I just felt that was, to me, this guy is an absolute lunatic, as is Smodrich. And I'm sorry, they do matter. They're serious players in this Israeli government. And so they have been waging a rhetorical campaign of wanting ethnic cleansing, which is a crime. So I don't think it's reached the bar of a genocide simply by comparison to other places where it's not been called a genocide. However, and I do, I've bought the argument that if Israel clearly has nuclear weapons, they don't admit it, but they clearly have them. If they wanted to drop a nuclear bomb on Gaza, they could have done. I understand if you're waging a deliberate genocide of a whole populace, you could do that. I get that argument, okay? But I do think they've got to be more accountable for what these guys on the government have been saying, because what they're talking about is ethnically cleansing. Now, to Trump's great credit, I think, for this alone, he should get the Nobel Peace Prize. Never mind anything else. He got hostages released, but he also made it clear to Netanyahu, you are not going to annex the West Bank, and I want the Palestinian people to come back to Gaza, and we're going to rebuild this with a coalition of people helping to rebuild it and trying once and for all get this situation sorted in a way that we had with Northern Ireland, for example, near my country, where after decades and decades of conflict between warring neighbours, in the end, when nobody thought it could happen, in the late 90s, Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, Senator Mitchell got together and they managed to barrel through a peace plan that has pretty well held steady ever since, and the killing stopped on both sides. This can be done. It's incredibly difficult, but I am delighted that Donald Trump, in my opinion, has barreled through some common sense into Netanyahu, who was being fueled by these guys.
Have you interviewed Netanyahu yet?
Yeah, three times, but not since the war started.
Okay, that's the part. I'm talking about during the war. So have you reached out to him?
Yeah,
no?
he won't come on.
Why do you think?
He doesn't want to answer these questions.
So you've invited him, but he won't come on.
Yeah, many times. I've interviewed him 3 times before. I went to Jerusalem. I went to his office for CNN. Back in 2011-12.
So if he agreed to have you on and you'd go to Israel to interview him?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Very interesting that he hasn't come on with you. Okay, Piers, great to have you on. As usual, it's always a good conversation.
I love talking to you.
And I love the fact that it's this way, Ron.
Yes.
So I want to learn more about where you're at as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Likewise.
Patrick,
appreciate you.
Great to see you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.